I share a lot of recipes with you on this channel, but oftentimes when I get comments, I realize that there's a lot of things that I want to share with you that I feel like could make your life a little bit better based off of my knowledge of my short period of time that I've been on this planet that I really feel like could help you. And one of those things that I want to talk to you about today is on the subject of how to eat healthy when you're on a budget. Because I think one of the biggest misconceptions I often hear is people's, and I don't want to say excuse, but I think it's like almost like a mentality that I don't know who told us this, and we've just kind of been repeating it. And that's that in order to eat healthy, you have to spend a lot of money. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm going to leave a timestamp on this video if you want to skip around from this little story I want to tell you. But like, I want to tell you where I'm coming from and why I was inspired to share this video with you. Because I feel really fortunate to be in the position where I am today, where like, yes, I have a budget, but obviously I've lived way more difficult times in the past and in the not so distant past. That I feel like I can share from a place of like, I've been there and I understand you, but here's what I did to help it make it a little bit easier. So the first story I want to share with you is growing up in Mexico. If you've been on my channel long enough, you probably already know my story. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Mexico. We didn't have indoor plumbing. We didn't have electricity. Access to cities was very minimal. We pretty much like lived off of the land. And I wouldn't say like I was never starving. So I guess that's a really good point because I think there was always someone when you live in a village type of life, like there's always someone there taking care of you because people share their things with each other. And obviously like you're not going to starve, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live. But we were on very tight budgets very often. Like I have memories of my mom, and I don't think I've ever shared this with like anyone on this channel, but like I have memories of my mom being very worried. Like I was really little, but I remember her being really worried. Like, my dad was working in the US and he would send money sometimes. We didn't have access to phones and things like that. So like sending a communication to him took a while. And sometimes she was like on her last bits of money and trying to figure out like, how am I going to feed these kids? I have memories of that. And I was really happy. My childhood wasn't unhappy. Like I roam around in hills and grass and I have really beautiful memories from that. But budgets were tight. And I remember the things she did to help us and feed us healthy because she loved cooking. So we ate really good food because she enjoyed the process of cooking, but also because she was really resourceful in what she was cooking. The second part of my story is after college, I decided that I wanted to move to New York City. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, but also one of the hardest times when it came to growing up. There was a lot of learning that happened when I lived in New York City for the 12 years that I lived there. But very specifically in the beginning part of moving to New York City, I remember I used up pretty much all of the money that I had into getting an apartment because it was also the first time that I was like on a lease on my own. So getting that lease, they required a lot of down payment and pretty much the money that I had saved up went to that. And then I was in the transition of like getting a job, but I didn't have one. So there was also no money coming in. And finally, the money that I had was like barely enough to pay rent. And I remember having such a tight budget for food, like so tight that the first week of being in New York City, I kid you not, I had nothing. I was sleeping on the floor. I didn't even have a pot or a pan to cook in. I was cooking. I've never shared this story. I was cooking on, those like metal containers that you get. They're not metal, they're like tin containers that you get on fast food. I was cooking on those. And I remember going to the dollar store and buying the most like crappy knife you can think of. But I had a knife, right? And just cooking off of what I had. My budget was so tight. So when I share these things of like my little tips and tricks on how to eat healthy on a really tight budget, I wanted you to know where I'm coming from, because I've been there and I've been able to eat healthy and I've been able to at least keep my health up, like maintain it, right? Even if I wasn't eating the most luxurious meals, but I was still feeding my body the nutrients that it needed in order for me to still be able to eat healthy on that extreme budget. Because trust me, you guys, I was sleeping on the floor in my New York apartment for like a year. It was a really long time. So let's get into the video. So my first trick to eating healthy and on a very tight budget is to focus on foods from the earth. And what I mean by that is focus on eating vegetable and fruit heavy meals. Now, if you're plant-based or vegan or, whatever label you want to give yourself, this is obviously going to come really easy to you. But I realize that there's also a lot of people out there that still eat animal products. And so even if you eat animal products, I would say this is a shift you can make while you're trying to figure out your finances and bettering your life. It can save you so much money if you try to eat more vegetable forward meals. Even if you don't fully give up, animal products or dairy, this is going to save you a lot of money from the get-go. Right now, as we speak, I don't eat animal products. I eat eggs and honey sometimes, but I don't eat, meat and dairy. And when I talk to other families, I can tell you that my grocery bill is way less than people who are not eating healthy food and are still incorporating animal products, because typically vegetables and fruits are going to be cheaper if you're buying them like as they come. I'm not talking about buying cut up vegetables and things like that, or cut up fruits, because that tends to be really expensive. I'm talking about buying just the vegetables and the fruit as they come from, the farms. That is going to save you a lot of money. So again, you don't have to give up all of your meat products if you still want to eat that. It is not my call, that is your journey. But try to incorporate more of those things into your meals, because I promise you it's going to immediately help you cut down on your grocery bills. Number 2, and that is try to find grocery stores that, I guess a lot of people, they often call them international grocery stores. So these are going to be like your Mexican grocery stores, your Asian grocery stores, those kinds of places that, at least in the US, and obviously I can't talk for the whole world, but at least in the US, which most of my audience is here watching this in the US, international markets, because they incorporate already, like a lot of us are immigrants, right? That are shopping at these international grocery stores. So we are accustomed to not always eating meat products. Like in Mexico, that was one of the reasons why we were eating a lot of vegetables and fruits and grains and legumes and stuff, is because we didn't have a lot of money for the meat products. So our recipes were already very vegetable forward. Like that's how my mom fed us a lot in Mexico, because it was cheaper. It was cheaper to buy the vegetables and the fruits. So these international grocery stores are always going to have a higher selection of vegetables and fruits that are going to be less expensive than if you're going to like an American grocery store, because they're able to sell those products a lot faster. Therefore, they can give you better prices, and they're often going to be more fresh because they're selling them a lot quicker. So when you're on a budget, go to those grocery stores. Like I remember when I was in New York City, and when I was really, really broke, I would go to Chinatown to buy all of my fruits and vegetables, because they were honestly like 50% less than if I was just going to the grocery store that was near my apartment. And yes, I was hauling that on the subway train, and it like took forever to get there. But then in the meantime, I could probably find like dollar dumplings and things like that. So I mean, it is worth it. It is so worth it to go. And also you end up finding a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't have. Like I remember they would have these delicious Moscato grapes that they would always sell there. And normally, like, you don't find this at a regular grocery store. And they were like the most delicious. It's from like, these are the grapes that they make Moscato wine from. So you can imagine they were like the most delicious, sweet little grapes. And they were so inexpensive. So go to these markets. Like right now, I live in the Southwest. I no longer live in New York City. But I go to Mexican grocery stores because I can always find so many vegetables that are part of Mexican cuisine that would have been like sometimes double or triple the amount at like a Whole Foods. So you can find a lot of really good prices at international grocery stores. Number 3 is farmers markets. So I can't speak for the entire country, but I've been to farmers markets in both the West Coast and the East Coast, and I find the farmers markets can have really good prices on fresh, really healthy ingredients. So I'm talking about the vegetables, the fruits, grains, legumes, those kinds of things. I've noticed that there's a trend where farmers markets have kind of become like a place where you go and buy already made foods and a lot of like pre-packaged things. So I'm not talking about those things because that can get really expensive. Like if you're going to the farmer's market to buy like a bottle of salsa, yes, it's probably delicious. And yes, it's probably like gourmet and really good ingredients. And you can't find this anywhere else. If you have the budget for that, then please support them. I sometimes support them when I'm able to. But those things can add up a farmer's market. I'm talking about go to the farmer's market, the actual stall that's coming from a local farm. And you're always going to find really, really good prices there. And all of the things are going to be fresh. You're basically cutting out the middleman between the farm and all the way to getting to your grocery store. So you're not paying all of that price in between, you're paying the farmer themselves. So not only are you doing a really good thing and helping support your local businesses, but you're going to find really good prices. Another thing that I found, and again, I don't know if this is true in every single state in the US, but I have found that most farmers markets will actually accept EBT. So you can buy all of these really good ingredients that are fresh with EBT if you are in the need and are using those funds for it. So yes, you can go in and get the most delicious things at farmers markets. In New York City specifically, I was really lucky. I had a farm that would come to my neighborhood. They were in a church. And these are the things that I kind of like suggest that you seek out, because you will find sometimes that there's farms that come to very specific locations across the city. Sometimes it doesn't have to be like your Saturday's farmer market or whatever. Like it can be a very specific farm coming to your neighborhood, and they have even better prices than like at a big farmer's market. So sometimes these are called CSAs, where you're pledging to support the farm, and in return they give you like a mixed box of the ingredients that they have for that week that they picked out fresh. And so this stuff can even be fun because you can be paying $20-$30 for a box of really fresh vegetables, and it's gonna actually force you to maybe seek out like new recipes and different things that you may like. And yes, it can be a little bit more work in trying to figure out what to make with these vegetables, but it's going to save you so much money. In New York, I did everything from like the local farm that would come to my neighborhood to supporting specific CSAs. And honestly, guys, sometimes I could get my entire week's worth for like 2 people of vegetables to cook like for the whole week for like $20. So these are ways that like you might not know exist, but they're there. There's also some companies, and this is sort of like with the farmers market, so I'm going to keep it in this one, but there's companies that are working to get rid of fruits that are not pretty looking, so imperfect foods. And what they do is they gather from all of the local farms and sometimes even grocery stores. And these are really good products that just look ugly because grocery stores don't want them. You can find them on like Facebook groups and things like that. And they will tell you, hey, this week we're going to be at the church's, like, not church, at the parking lot of a church. And I'm going to be selling out these boxes. And sometimes, like, I have been able to get here in the Southwest, I've been able to get like this huge box, you guys, of like mangoes, like the most delicious sweet mangoes that just maybe had a little nick here and there for like $7. And it's like insane. But you might be thinking like, well, what am I going to do with all that? Eat some, freeze some, that way you can make smoothies. Like, you just kind of have to be a little bit creative and maybe like seek out the information that's local to you and specific to the place where you live. But there's so many people out there trying to get really good fresh produce and grains even sometimes to you at prices that are so inexpensive. Number 4, this one is probably one that is most accessible to everybody in the US and obviously even some other parts of the world. But that is to seek out wholesale bulk items. And so what I mean by that is that nowadays there's a lot of grocery stores out there, like the Costco's, the Sam's Clubs of the world, that provide really good prices on wholesale items that are good. And I don't mean, because I know that this can easily get into a conversation of like, I go to Costco and I spend $500, but I want you to, take a moment. Don't be mad at me, but I want you to really look at yourself and look at what you're actually spending that money on at Costco. Because I can go to a Costco and I can easily spend $500 on all of this stuff I didn't need, right? Like, you can go in there and end up with like, I don't know, a plushy, beautiful throw that I didn't need. And I could also go in there and spend like $100 on only fruits and vegetables that are organic and fresh and are going to last me for the next 2 weeks, which is something that I started doing, being that I do live in the Southwest. The farmers markets are not available as abundantly throughout the whole year. So in those times when the farmers markets are not available, Costco is kind of where I end up going now. And I'm being honest, it doesn't make me feel that good. I would much rather support a local farm than I would the Costco. But honestly, when you're on a budget, you just kind of have to work with what you have, right? And a lot of us are in that place right now. So going to Costco, I can easily buy organic fruits and vegetables at way better prices than I can find them at all of the other grocery stores. And what I mean by that is like a huge bag of carrots can sometimes be like $2, when at like a Whole Foods, I'm paying like $5 for organic carrots and it's like a third of that. So you can easily eat healthy. You just have to have a lot of willpower. Don't buy don't buy all the chips, don't buy all the chocolates, you have to have a lot of willpower. Go buy what you really need, and I promise you it can save you tons of money. Number 5, I almost didn't put this one on the list, but I feel like it's a good reminder. Make your own food. I mean, when you're on a budget, you just have to work with what you have. When I remember my mom, when we were on really big budgets, I mean, she wasn't going out and buying food. Also, we lived in the middle of nowhere, so she didn't have the option of buying things from other people that were already made. She was just cooking all the time. And yes, it can get tiresome. Yes, when I was in New York City and I lived on a budget, I worked sometimes like 50 hours a week and I was away from home, and that's not including commuting. So sometimes I would get home at 9 p.m. and I was still cooking my food because I had to take my own food for lunch the next day. And I was eating dinner at that time, and I would wake up early so I could make myself breakfast because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to eat out. And that was the reality. And it did suck, and I was tired all the time. But my priority was making sure that 1, I could eat, and 2, I wanted to make sure that I was still eating healthy. And so, following all of the other things I just told you on the list, I needed to make sure I was cooking to save money. And when I mean like make your own food is sometimes we can get in a rut of thinking that like we live in such an industrialized world where everything is packaged in pretty things at the grocery store for us and it seems like it's convenient. But a lot of the times those products are adding to your budget. Like I'm going to give you an example. Tortillas. Like tortillas, yes, they can be sort of cheap when you're buying them at the grocery store. Like you think of like, one of those brands where it's like 100 of them for like, I don't even know, I haven't bought tortillas in a while, but it's not that much, right? However, all of those ingredients in there are not healthy. So then you're like, well, I'm going to buy the healthy ones. And then you go to like a Whole Foods and there's 5 tortillas in a package for like $5. And that's ridiculous, right? You're like, well, buy the 100 of the crappy tortillas or buy the 5 for like the $5. And I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be one or the other. There is an in between where it's cheaper than those tortillas at Whole Foods, but healthier than those 100 tortillas of the crappy 30 ingredient ones, right? And that is, you can make masa harina tortillas at home for a fraction of the price, and it's going to be healthier for you. We live in a world where there's companies that are giving us really good masa harina, like high quality heirloom corn that's non-GMO, that's good for your body, that's nixtamalized so that your body can process it better. And they're selling this for not that much. Like with a whole bag of masa harina, you could be making, honestly, sometimes I can get almost like 100 tortillas off of it. And it just, one, it's going to taste better. Two, your body's going to be thankful for it because it's going to process it. And it's just, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can eat healthy and still save money. And listen, if all you can afford is masa harina and it's, the GMO kind and all of that, it is still going to be healthier than that pack of tortillas that has the 30 ingredients on there that you don't even know if your body is processing because of all the chemicals. And it's going to taste better than that. Like it just is. So you can still save money. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. It can be an in-between. Another example of that is bread. I have been making my own bread for a while. Yes, sometimes, you can find really good bread at the farmer's market and it's still pretty cheap. Like I've been able to find beautiful sourdough for like $5, and that a loaf of bread is going to last me for an entire week, which is not that much. Obviously cheaper than buying a sandwich. Like for the cost of one sandwich at like Sprouts, right? You can buy an entire loaf and make many sandwiches from that. But if you're making your own, and I'm not, even if you don't want to make your own sourdough, because I get it, taking care of a sourdough can be intimidating and it takes a little bit of practice. But even if you're using the instant yeast to make your own bread, it is still going to taste better and it's going to be better for your body because it's going to be like 3 ingredients for you to make a loaf of bread for your family than that $5 packet at the grocery store, right? Again, it can be one or the other. There's like in betweens. You don't have to stick to just like the cheapest brand at the grocery store because probably making it at home is going to be cheaper in the long run anyway. Number 6 is another one that I almost didn't include on this list too, but I feel like it's still a really good reminder, and that's processed things. And what I mean by that is like, just don't buy them. And I know, again, it's hard, it's convenient sometimes, but just don't buy the processed things because those things add up. I think a lot of the times when I hear this notion of eating healthy is really expensive is because people are buying processed healthy things. Grocery stores are notorious for greenwashing and selling products that claim healthy when really they're just packaged, chemically processed foods that don't even resemble something from the earth. And it's really easy to get into the habit of buying those things. But if you're in a budget, just don't buy them because they're going to immediately save you tons of money. When I was super broke in New York City, like I just didn't buy the chips. One of the first things that came off of my grocery list was drinks, like sugary drinks, even tea, like bottled teas and things like that. They can add up so much money. Just don't buy them. If you really, really want something like a tea at home, make it. Like, it's going to take you like cents to make a huge bottle of tea. And, honey is not that expensive. Like, you can add honey, or if all you can afford is white sugar, then add your own white sugar. But it's going to immediately start saving you a lot of money, especially if you're plant-based. A lot of these mock meats, which honestly, if you've been on my channel, you know that I'm not a fan of them. I don't really encourage people to save them. I get that there's a time and a place when you're really looking for something to taste like something that it used to taste when you're transitioning. It can help in that transition of not eating animals anymore. But a lot of these packaged processed products are not healthy for you. They are labeled as plant-based, but when you really look at the ingredients, they end up with so many different things that you cannot even pronounce that are not actually anything from a plant. And so they add up in money. That's usually where I find that people are spending the majority of their budget is on processed things. And I'm talking chips, I'm talking cookies, I'm talking, again, these meat substitutes and drinks. They just add up so much. If you want snacks, buy nuts and seeds and fruit. Like, fruit is probably the cheapest snack that you can get. And water, right? Like, drink water. Your body's probably going to be really grateful. I forget, there's like a statistics, but it says they have looked at like our US diet, and they say that, like, I think, don't quote me, someone tell me in the comments what the actual percentage is, but it's like 80%, I think, of Americans are dehydrated. And it's probably because we're drinking all the things that we shouldn't be instead of just drinking water. And this also includes coffee. Like, I know that America runs on coffee. Like, people are addicted to going out and buying the sugary coffee wherever it is, and even specialty coffee, right? But that can add up so much. If you're on a budget, just make it at home. Don't buy, a lot of the times that coffee that you're buying, it tastes so good because it's a bunch of syrups that are super processed and just not good for you. So you can eat healthy without all of the money that you put into processed foods, and it's going to keep you on your budget. So all in all, these are just my quick tips based off of my experience of living in like rural Mexico on extreme budgets, and then living in one of the largest cities in the country on a very, very strict budget. And that's focus on veggies, food from the earth, right? Veggies and fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds. Shop at international markets because they're going to have really good products. Go to your farmer's market, support that local farm of yours because they're going to have really good prices. Buy bulk and wholesale when possible because they also have really, really good prices. Make your own food because, one, your body's going to thank you for it, but two, you're going to save tons of money. And lastly, don't buy those processed foods. I hope this list can help you. I would love to know, what is one thing, like if I didn't talk about one of these things on how can you eat healthy and still be on a budget, let me know down in the comments. I would love to learn from you. And if there's something that you think I missed that maybe you're like, maybe that doesn't work for me, I would also love to know, because I know that this list, again, I've lived in 2 parts of the world or the country, and also in Mexico, in rural Mexico. And they can pretty much work for any location, but maybe in the country where you're in, something doesn't match my list, and I would love to learn from you. So let me know. And if you're looking for recipes that are really simple, that are going to be very plan forward with all of these ingredients that I was telling you to, use in your budget, I will make sure to leave some here. And there's tons on the channel, and I would love to talk to you. And until next time, buen provecho.